name is Erick Komolo. I'm a lawyer, a practicing lawyer and academic based in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a university lecturer at Egerton University and Strathmore University, where I've taught over the last 8+ years in the Faculty of Law, majoring mostly in international trade, environmental law, public international law, human rights, amongst other areas, including, of course, employment law. I am also a member of the tax tribunal in government of Kenya and the judiciary, where I preside over cases primarily related to tax disputes between typical taxpayer, whether individual or corporate, against the Kenya Revenue Authority, which is the tax authority in the Republic of Kenya. Well, for a long time, I've always taken science to be more of the typical pure science as opposed to social science where I belong. So normally it's very interesting to refer to a lawyer like myself as a scientist. So when I applied for the workshop, my main aim was to kind of understand the synergy between law and sciences as I understood them to mean pure sciences. So I expected to develop kind of a working relationship to appreciate the perspective of pure scientists, and I met a good number of them, and lawyers. So that synergy really was my biggest expectation. I had hoped, and I still hope, that we are going to develop a collaboration across the continent amongst us fellows, and I'm very happy to report that SOFA is doing very well in terms of potential project areas we could work on. I have met 2 of them in Nairobi, actually, since we were last in Pretoria. And so that networking opportunity and synergy between various disciplines, what we normally call a multidisciplinary approach, is something that I had expected and that I think I'm actualizing. It is kind of eye-opening in many ways. First, because it's largely homegrown in the context of Africa, and 2, because rather practical. A typical fellowship is about funding a researcher or a scholar to spend some time in an academic environment, often a university research institute, and to then run their own projects. This fellowship is very practical in terms of bringing the right people with more or less similar or synergistic characters, and then kind of creating very practical and less boring environment for them to interact and get to know each other. So over the several days we were there at the University of Pretoria, the Future Africa campus, I got opportunity to literally know everyone who was in my cohort, not because I set out to know them, but because the activities that were put were such that you had to get to meet everyone and kind of do an activity 1 or 2 with them. And in the process, the activities themselves were designed to open up, and in the process you got to know them and got to relax a bit. So it's less strictly speaking academic and more practical in the sense of creating that environment for you to open up and then be able to collaborate going forward into the future. And I think that's a very unique component of it. The most memorable for me, well, there were several actually, but the most memorable that I will easily, and I still try to practice it, is that talking stick thing. I don't know whether I'm using the right word, but there's that thing called talking stick where you hold the stick and talk about your project and your future and your vision. So I did it, I think, twice. And somehow it's a very reflective activity in the sense that you have to introspect. There's not much room for speculation. There's not much room for lying. And important, it is voluntary, and it comes at a particular point when you have kind of already known everyone. So it's not like you're just introducing yourself and trying to portray a good image of yourself. It comes at a point, in my case, I think it came on the third day or the fourth day, at a point when you already know the fellowship fairly well, and you already have some clarity in terms of career prospects, ambition, and things like that. And so when I got to do my talking stick, I thought I got to reflect on really what I want to do. In my case, of course, spending more time in public service and hopefully in the advancing rule of law in Kenya. But there were several memorable moments, including, to be honest, outside the formal program, including that drum session where we were, beating drums all over. And of course, the closing ceremony organized by Bo and company was very, very memorable, social, and relaxing. Well, at two levels. As we speak here in Kenya, we are trying to organize a mini ASLP for Kenyan fellows. So basically, literally transferring the skills that we learned there to those of us colleagues in Kenya who may not have had the opportunity. So direct skills transfer, particularly the practical skills I'm talking about. But two, I've literally engaged my students in some kind of talking stick sessions, and I continue to do. Now this is more or less second semester since I engaged in the program. 2 semesters now since I participated in the program. And so I've tried to engage my students. Normally I teach students in groups of around 15, particularly when we are talking about human rights seminars, where research is more involved, where I want them to introspect a lot about the role of UN in implementation of human rights and how human rights integrated in the UN system. So, that's a very practical course. And to a large degree, you expect the students to internalize what human rights is, their role in it as upcoming lawyers, upcoming practitioners, upcoming international civil servants, and obviously as upcoming government officials. So I've tried to, on a couple of occasions, to have them imagine themselves in those roles as an international civil servant, as a government official, diplomat, as a researcher, shaping the future of human rights within the UN system. And the UN system is very broad to include UN agencies and the mainstream UN organization that we know based in New York. To some degree, I would say I've tried it in my private practice as a lawyer, because trial advocacy, this is really what lawyers do in court. It involves a lot of preparation. It involves a lot of anticipating the future in terms of the thought of the judge, the thought of the other side, the thinking that an approach they may have against your case. And so that introspection in preparing my clients when we are going for trial, for regular trials, has kind of shaped the way I try to question them, try to help them, because eventually it's their case, it's not my case. Mine is just to help them present their case. And I would say 2-3 clients have been a little bit, very responsive in terms of employing that tactic. And I'm hoping, I don't have the judgments yet, I'm hoping that may have shaped the way the courts view our presentation skills in terms of our advocacy skills. The only frustration, I must admit, is that courts are increasingly going online. So as much as we do this, we are doing it mostly online as opposed to physical. So I'm hoping that when Kenyan courts adopt the hybrid approach in terms of being able to have physical and virtual hearing options, then at a physical hearing, it may be the case that we demonstrate this for others to uptake more aggressively than it is the case at the moment with physical hearings. An African science leader, in my view, is anyone who is motivated enough to imagine themselves as a scientist and to spend time to build their career as scientists, regardless of the discipline they studied or they are studying. So an African scientist could as well be somebody from the arts, from social sciences, from humanities, from pure sciences as we know them, provided they invest in improving themselves to research proactively and productively about Africa, and importantly, build networks, deliberately collaborate with other African scientists so that we don't have a monolithic approach to research. We don't have a pro-discipline approach to research. We embrace more of multidisciplinary approach to research, more of what we nowadays call impact-based research. So as an African scientist, anyone who is motivated, regardless of his or her discipline, to do research collaboratively and translate that research to have impact on an ordinary person in Africa and advance the cause of Africa that is African-based, not necessarily shaped by foreign perceptions of Africa. Learn a thing or two from Future Africa, collaborate. And African governments fund, and ensure that you fund across boundaries so that scholars from South Africa get to collaborate with those from Kenya, scientists from Uganda get to collaborate with those from Malawi, Ghana, with Zimbabwe, and across the continent. So collaborate, and ensure that to the best of our abilities in Africa, we fund our own research. Once we get to that level where funding is more of homegrown, then we move to the next layer where we now collaborate with international, which is really what's happening now, with international colleagues from other continents, so that we kind of also cross-pollinate, learn from what they are doing right, and they also learn from what we are doing right. And I think that if we take that trajectory where collaboration within and across disciplines, and collaboration, transboundary collaboration, and of course, eventually outside the continent, then the future of Africa science and research, in my view, is very, very bright. I think there's a lot of untapped potential. I think there's a lot of what I would call legacy issues in terms of external dependency on external funding. And obviously that is shaped by colonial history of Africa, but it's our time to change it. And I think Future Africa is one of those institutions, based on my visits there now twice, that is trying to challenge that narrative. And I hope that based on what we're doing here in Kenya and what other colleagues are doing elsewhere, that we are going to challenge it in the coming years. That is challenging. It's too good to be described in one word. But let me just say, eye-opening.